So hello everybody, my name is Sandrine Salerno. I am the Director of Sustainable Finance Geneva. Very pleased to have you on that second webinar of the GLIS. I will manage this webinar with Tim Raji, with the Vice President of our organization. Maybe a few words on SFG, and then I'll give the floor to Tim, and Tim will introduce our speaker of this afternoon. Warm thanks to Anna, Either, Stefania, and Diana, who will talk about finance and equality this afternoon. So maybe a few words on SFG. Nora, if you can put the presentation of SFG, just to give you a taste of what SFG is. Next slide, please. SFG is a non-profit organization. It's a pretty young, but still one of the first, actually, association on sustainable finance in Switzerland, born in Geneva 13 years ago. It's a community dedicated to sustainable finance. We are organizing with our partner a very big event, the biggest conference on sustainable finance at the end of this year, and named Building Bridges. It's the second edition. I hope you'll be present. It will be a presential but also an online event on sustainable finance. And the Gender Lens Initiative for Switzerland, the GLIS, is a working group of SFG and its partner, launched on the very important date, the 8th of March this year. This is our second webinar on Gender Lens. Our ambition is really to make finance move on Gender Lens initiative, on Gender Lens product, and have a very open vision of what finance should be on this 21st century. So just for this afternoon and the way we'll work, and now I'm going to give the floor to Tim Raji, working for Alpha Mundi, but also Vice President of SFG. If you have questions for our four great speakers, you have the chat function. Feel free to use it. And at the end of this session, Tim will pick a few questions and ask our presenters to answer. So thank you a lot, Gliese, to be with us this afternoon. And I give the floor to Tim Raji.
Thank you, Sandrine. Thank you very much, and thanks to SFG for hosting this initiative on Gender Lens. I think that's, it shows that SFG is always at the front line of innovation in Switzerland. So we're fortunate to have great speakers today. The webinar is entitled International Public Sector Standards and Initiatives, and we have representatives from the IETC, the UNDP, the IFC, and UNCTAD, who will share how their organization is contributing to the emerging standards and best practices for Gender Lens investing in general, with an emphasis on emerging markets and developing countries. So just before we get started, for those of you who haven't attended the first webinar, the GLIS is essentially structured around three core pillars. We've got academic research that wants to provide the data on the Swiss market and build a business case for Gender Lens investing. We have financial innovation and products that help people move money towards Gender Lens investing and women. And we also have industry standards, best practices, and certifications that are usually the realm of either the the public sector, or of public-private partnerships. To disseminate all the content that is being created with these three streams of activity, we organize these webinars and other events, and we also have an outreach program for the press and for SFG members and GLIS partners through articles and through the SFG newsletter. So that's it. That's really the framework of the GLIS. I think we've had strong momentum since we launched in March. And without further ado, I will pass on the word to our first speaker, Anna Mori from the ITC on She Trade Initiative. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you so much, Sandrine and partners, for this very important event. And good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to some of you. Big pleasure to be here with you today. So maybe we can move to the next slide, please. So my name is Anna Mori. I head partnerships and projects at ITC. We are at the International Trade Center. We are a joint agency of the United Nations and of the World Trade Organization. We basically support small businesses increase their competitiveness to reach new markets, and access to finance, of course, is one of the bottlenecks for this development. And at ITC, at this agency, we have an initiative called She Trades, which aims to connect 3 million women to markets. And while implementing capacity building projects in more than 35 developing countries, we also work around 7 key areas with partners to unlock opportunities for women-led businesses. And these 7 key areas are on the screen that you can see from 1 to 7. So we go from ensuring that ministries of trade, chambers of commerce collect good data on women's economic participation in different sectors, to promoting gender into trade policies, investment policies at the national level, as well as with the WTO members, since we wear both UN and WTO hats. We also train women on everything that you can imagine, from packaging with UPS and DHL, logistics with Maersk, or e-commerce with eBay, and so on. And of course, one special pillar of work is the one on access to finance that I have highlighted on the screen, which is number 7. And I'll be talking a little bit more about it on the next slide, please. Right, so the crowd here, I think it's most of financial institutions. We have some entrepreneurs as well. I believe that most of us know that women own approximately 30% of SMEs globally, but are 3 times less likely to access financing through venture capitalists than men. And we also know already that investing in women has a positive and economic social impact, and it presents a huge and tapped market opportunity for financial institutions. One of the very recent researchers says that firms with greater gender diversity, defined as either having a female as a CEO, or greater than 20% on the board, or greater than 25% women in management, outperformed with better returns and much less risk than the ones that are not diverse. So, and another interesting fact is that startups founded or co-founded by women perform better over time, generating 10% more in cumulative revenue over a 5-year period than all male founded startups. And at ITC, we knew already, of course, the business case is out there. We need to be speaking more about the importance of gender-lens investing and the how women are good contributors to social and economic development. But at ITC, we understood this a few years ago, and we decided to do something about it. And especially now during times of COVID, right? Because we have a very extensive network of more than 100,000 women entrepreneurs that we have been working with for more than 3 decades. They're coming from 75 countries, most of them from developing countries, and of course they need help to survive the pandemic crisis, right? So right now what we are doing, we are going beyond equipping them with the skills and knowledge they need, because they also need to they need market information. They need to know the ship dynamics, and how the blockage of the Suez Channel has completely changed prices in terms of logistics, or how the global supply chains are being disrupted. So they need advice on how to retool existing capabilities and how to manage this new cash flow as well. So what we do, we are providing technical assistance to improve the investment readiness of women entrepreneurs under our network, and also SMEs that are benefiting women. So we perform due diligence. We're building a pipeline of businesses that are credible and robust enough to de-risk potential capital for our network. We have approximately 30 impact investors and financiers in our network. So in short, what we do, we prepare these businesses led by women or benefiting women, And then we match up with our network of financiers who need to provide us, of course, with their specific investment criteria and commitment to genderless investing. Because if they're not willing to invest in our networks of women entrepreneurs, we have a matrix to really understand what are the weak points of that businesses, of each one of these businesses, so we can analyze this data later on. And in 12 months, under one of our pilots, we have managed to help transacted $6 million in impact investing and microfinance, including equity grants, etc., for 230 women entrepreneurs in Zambia, India, Uganda, and many other countries. So I would say that we are very happy and grateful for these collaborations with these partners. It's running very well, but at the same time, we acknowledge that individual entities have somehow struggling to catalyze sufficient levels of private capital, and much of this capital raised is going towards low risk investments, which is not the case of many of these women entrepreneurs in developing countries. So what I'd like to share with you today as well is that together with CARE, the NGO, international NGO, Bamboo Capital Partners, which is, thanks for changing the slide, an asset manager based in Geneva, and ITC, which is a United Nations organization, we have put together a new fund called the CARE She Trades Impact Fund, which is a $75 million blended finance fund with a 15 million catalytic capital tranche. And we are targeting South and Southeast Asian regions, so Cambodia, Bangladesh, Laos, Vietnam, and Philippines. The fund is legally registered and established with a governance mechanism, with an investment structure, and of course an impact framework. And first, what the fund will be doing is we'll be measuring how the business policies and practices of the fund's portfolio companies improve the full participation and economic conditions of women, not only as women-led businesses, but as workers and consumers. And second, our portfolio will include these scalable models that operate in this intersection nexus between gender inclusion and climate change. So we'll be measuring both gender and climate impacts. It's super well documented that women are more exposed to the side effects of climate change, but at the same time, they are powerful agents of change, contributing to sustainable development. And perhaps you're asking, okay, why Southeast Asia? Why did you start this first fund with Southeast Asia? And I think maybe Heather from IFC can bring some light here later. But it's because it's a very underserved region right now, and IFC studies have shown that the global financial gap for SMEs in the Asian continent is huge, and only 3 to 6% of these global assets are being invested right now in Asia. And of course, there are 10 of millions of people that are living below the poverty line in the region, especially in these developed countries. So I'd like to share these two things. So if you're women entrepreneurs listening to us, looking for finance, do sign up to shetrades.com. If you're investors looking to find a good pipeline of women entrepreneurs and support on increasing their competitiveness and find some potential investees, do speak with us. And to finalize, on a separate track, I'm very glad to announce that we'll be launching a new publication. Hopefully we'll be using this platform to do so, which is called 12 Lessons in Gender Lens Investing. It's a very practical report on the remaining gaps to address financial needs of women entrepreneurs. We are highlighting lessons learned from our network of investors and women entrepreneurs that we capture over this past few years. Basically, is the do's and the don'ts in terms of gender lens investing, not focusing so much on the financiers starting gender lens investing, but rather the ones that have already started but want to deepen their strategies to reach better impact. So stay tuned, and perhaps I stop here. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Anna, for this very succinct and yet comprehensive overview of everything that you guys are doing at ITC and with Bamboo and CARE. very inspiring. And I think that you're on, CARE is being presented with in partnership with USAID at another event tomorrow. So definitely a global scope. Yeah.
Good to know.
All right, we will keep questions for the end of the presentations, but in the meantime, if you have questions, please just use a Q&A function and write them in the chat, and that will make easier the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So we're now moving to our next speaker, who is Heather Mckibnes from the IFC, and who will present us the IFC's perspective on gender inequalities in emerging markets. Heather, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim and Sandrine, for hosting this event. And good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone joining from different time zones. It's really a pleasure to be contributing to this conversation, especially right now in terms of gender equality. I mean, this is a topic that is really critical for IFC, and also how do we allocate our capital in a way that advances gender equality. And I would say also there's a sense of urgency that I may convey in this presentation, because now, given the pandemic, we're seeing gender gaps between men and women being exacerbated. And it's really putting at risk decades of progress that we've made. So if you could go to the next slide, I'll quickly introduce myself and then just set the context. So I am a global technical specialist in IFC's Gender and Economic Inclusion Group. And what that means is I spend my days advising our project teams, our clients, and our partners on how do we close gender gaps through our investments. And specifically, I lead our work on advancing women SMEs access to markets. So Anna, we should probably have a conversation. And then also our work on our portfolio on inclusive business, and then our gender lens investing work. But just to set the economic context really quickly. So even before the pandemic hit, globally, we're seeing countries are losing 172 trillion in wealth because of differences in lifetime earnings between men and women. You layer on the pandemic, and now we're seeing that women's jobs are now 1.8 times more vulnerable than those of men. And there is data that suggests that if we do not address these, that global GDP growth could be $1 trillion lower by 2030. However, if we do take action and allocate our capital in a way that is advancing gender equality, we could be adding 13 trillion to the global GDP by 2030. So in addition to this economic case, there is a compelling case for investors. And what we're starting to see is capital being raised at a faster rate with a gender focus. In the last 2 years, we've seen capital in private debt, private equity, and venture capital quadruple over the last 2 years. But it's in 2019, it cleared about 4.8 billion. And this rise doesn't really resemble the magnitude that we really need. And so at IFC, we are playing a role in investing intentionally, using our capital to invest in companies and solutions that are seeking to close gender gaps between men and women. And our approach is really rooted in the fact that by doing so, we'll drive the growth of businesses and economies and improve the lives of families and communities. And our focus is really around how do we strengthen women's participation in the private sector across 5 key roles that we see women playing, whether it's in leadership roles within a company, on a board, or in the leadership teams, and as employees, as entrepreneurs, as consumers of products and services, and then also as stakeholders in the community. And what you're seeing in terms of the slides, for those that can see them on the screen, what I've done is I've actually translated these 5 roles that women play in the economy into the 5 investment strategies that investors can adopt to look at their portfolio with a gender lens. And this is actually from work that we have done recently with CDC, the UK DFI, where we took a step back and reflected collectively on what we've learned across our engagement with fund managers and in our own investment portfolios, and published a gender lens investing guide. And so I encourage folks to take a look at it. It focuses on private equity, but it does apply to many investors. So let me share a little bit about what we're doing within the context of financial institutions and funds. And if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So building on some of the statistics that Anna had raised, you know, an area that we have been looking at since 2012 is how do we address the access to capital gap between men and women. And as we know, women entrepreneurs in general, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, face considerable constraints in terms of access and capital to grow their businesses. But this is disproportionately worse for women. And apologies, there's a train passing behind me, so hopefully you can hear me. And we estimate from our research that the size of that gap between men and women in accessing capital is about $1.5 trillion. So on the debt side of our business, we have a dedicated financing program called Banking on Women, where we work with financial institutions to provide investment capital so that they can on-lend to women SMEs, but also we couple that with advisory to help banks build a profitable business that targets women as a consumer segment. And that advice can range anywhere from how do you sex disaggregate your data to really understand how women and men are using different financial and non-financial services. Is there any types of products that could be developed that would help meet women's needs better? And we now have a committed portfolio of over $2.8 billion, and we're working with over 100 financial institutions. And I think what's important to note is around the business case. I think although we are engaging with financial institutions, investing in them and collaborating and providing our expertise, there's a development agenda that we're trying to achieve. There's also a strong business rationale. And so, for example, we found with our client institutions that the average non-performing loan ratio for a loan portfolio, and basically what that is a measure of is the asset quality. But of the portfolio of loans that go to women-led small and medium-sized businesses, it's significantly lower, the NPL ratio at 3.7% against a total book of 5%. So it's an interesting statistic that we are looking at. We're not only doing this to be able to address a critical need to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses with access to capital, but this also is good business for financial institutions. So in the context of time, if you could go to the next slide, I'll highlight what we've been doing with in another area of our work. And so over the past few years, we've expanded our gender lens investing to work with private equity and venture capital funds. And this has been an interesting journey, and I like, Tim, how you mentioned that one of the pillars of the GLIS is looking at research. When we started to work with private equity and venture capital funds, we realized that there wasn't a lot of data out there that really demonstrated what the return on investment could be if fund managers start to look at not only gender gaps within their own operations, but also across their investment portfolio. And so what we did is we did a study, and we found, we quantified basically the dearth of women represented in the sector. And so we found that 11% of senior investment professionals in emerging markets funds are women, but we also found there's just a dearth of capital that is going to women-owned and gender-balanced portfolio companies. However, the interesting piece is that's really helped us garner movement to allocate capital to funds with a gender lens is that we found that funds that have gender-balanced leadership can generate up to 10 to 20% higher returns, and portfolio companies that have gender-balanced leadership can demonstrate a 25% greater increase in their valuations. So those are powerful statistics. How are we using that? I would say there's a couple of ways. One is that we're allocating capital to women investors. So we are making a priority to invest in fund managers that are gender balanced with women represented. We are also prioritizing impact in early stage entrepreneurship. So how do we address the gender gap in early stage capital, including venture capital? And one example is our program on ScaleX, and this is an interesting partnership with the Women's Entrepreneurship Finance Initiative, which is a consortia of donors that have come together to support investments with concessional capital. And this is an innovative mechanism where we are incentivizing accelerators that can help women startups raise at least $1 million in capital. We incentivize them with a bonus, the bonus to do that. And so that's a program we're piloting. It's called ScaleX, and is a way that we're trying to address that early stage capital in the sector. And then last but not least, and I'll close out, is we are also investing in funds that have made a commitment to invest in portfolio companies that are seeking to close gender gaps. And this is really important because we see that private equity and venture capital are really vehicles that can spur change in how capital is allocated to companies. And I would encourage, I mentioned this Gender Lens investing guide that we put together earlier. We also mapped out across the investment life cycle how managers can think about how they can think about applying a gender lens using those 5 strategies that I mentioned earlier. And so I'll wrap this up and just say a key aspect to all of our work is partnerships. This has been incredibly important. I think what yields the greatest results for us and for every organization is collective action. And so I mentioned WeFi, that's a key partner of ours, but also our development partners. And so if we get into the conversation, I'd love to hear from others how they're leveraging partnerships, and I can share more on that. But I'll close out for the context of time.
Thank you very much, Heather, also for respecting the time. Very appreciated. Our next speaker is Stefania Bonilla-Ferret from UNCTAD, who will cover how to mainstream gender in investment promotion. Stefania, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Sandrine, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I think the Gender Lens initiative for Switzerland is such a timely platform and such a timely initiative. And as you all know, most of us that are based here in Geneva or in the Geneva area in Switzerland, there's such a rich ecosystem of different types of stakeholders working on sustainable finance and sustainable investment. And I think we can all learn a lot from each other, and working in this space, I mean, collaboration, Heather was just saying, and partnership is key. So thank you for inviting international organizations, because we're not always included in these discussions, and we're doing a lot, and we are partnering a lot with the private sector and private sector partners. So what I'll tell you a bit about is what we're doing at UNCTAD with regards to investment and sustainable development. For those of you who may not be familiar with UNCTAD, we have a division that focuses specifically on international investment issues, and really our umbrella of work is investment in sustainable development. So back in 2014, as you all know, when the Sustainable Development Goals were being adopted, we published our annual World Investment Report, and at the time, we thought, okay, well, this is great. We have these Sustainable Development Goals, and our colleagues that year calculated, well, how much do we need in terms of investment to be able to really achieve these Sustainable Development Goals, right? So be able to achieve the 2030 agenda. And so at the time, we calculated that it was the financing gap, the investment gap, represented about $2.5 trillion a year, right? And of course, this gap needs private investment and private sector partners. So the governments can't do it all alone. So that's sort of our baseline, our umbrella work. And just to say that our World Investment Report will be published, the one for this year will be published on the 21st of June, and you'll be able to see the latest data of, we've kept track how investment trends have been affected and changed, and to which sustainable development goals are they going to, and how obviously the impact of the pandemic has had on global investment and the sustainable development goals. So we can go to the next slide. Within that framework, we're also working specifically in the investment and SDG 5 on gender equality space. So we're working on a lot of topics and really exciting research and capacity building and sort of dialogues and conferences. I'm going to speak on a really specific area of work, or one of the specific areas of work that we're looking at, which is the one that I'm working on. I work in the investment promotion section. And so, as most of you probably know, what is investment promotion? Well, most countries have an agency or a body that's in charge of attracting investment, of marketing their country as an investment destination, and facilitating investments into the country, being the first point of contact to multinational enterprises like Nestle or whoever, and providing them with information, facilitating administrative procedures, advising them on where to locate, which land to invest in, and different things like that. So we started off, as probably a lot of you working in the gender mainstreaming space with the assumption that, of course, no topic is gender neutral, right? So we thought, well, investment promotion cannot be gender neutral. And even though it might not seem tangible to everybody or the link very obvious at first, we thought, okay, the work of investment promotion agencies must have a gender dimension. There must be some gender implications to the work of our main stakeholders, which are investment promotion agencies in developing countries. And so the first thing we did is we asked questions. Well, we said, okay, well, are any of them doing something? Have any of them thought of this gender link or the gender implication of their work? We can go to the next slide. And what we did last year in the middle of the pandemic is, well, we asked them. We have a broad access to a whole network of investment promotion agencies all over the world, and we're in constant contact with them. And we asked them, so what are you doing on gender? Have you thought about this? And it was a really interesting exercise because we found out that a lot of them are actively trying to mainstream gender into their work. The interesting is that they're doing it in very different ways. Some of them deliberately and strategically. Some of them more in an ad hoc manner because someone in the agency is very passionate about gender. Some of them are doing it but are not reporting on it. And so there's a wide variety. And in a nutshell, and I invite you all please to read and comment on our paper and our work and our activities in this area. But what we found is that, as I mentioned, these investment promotion agencies, they provide information to Nestle when it comes into the country. And so we thought, okay, well, they're putting them in contact with local employees or potential local talent pools or entrepreneurs to engage in joint ventures with, or local suppliers. And a lot of them are making active efforts to include women when they're providing that information. So providing gender inclusive information, right? And so from the basis of all of these examples that we gathered, we provided some initial guidelines to also raise awareness and sensitize those agencies that have perhaps not thought about it to that extent, and give them recommendations on how they can include mainstream gender into their work. And so because at the end of the day, all of the countries, and especially now, they want to attract more investment into one of their key sectors, and the business case is the same for these key sectors, right? Like addressing the gender gap in key sectors that they want to attract investments in makes these sectors more attractive for investors, affects their development in a positive manner. So I encourage you to read and look at a lot of our country examples and guidelines that we provided. We can go on to the next slide. From the response that we got and the rich examples and research that we conducted, we decided to include last year a special mention as part of our investment promotion awards that we hold every year. Because part of what we do, of course, and I think it's the same probably for many of you working in the gender space, is generating awareness, right? And talking about this and sensitizing our stakeholders about how they can mainstream gender, because it's a relatively new field for everybody, right? And so sharing and providing this platform to share best practices is really important to us. And last year we provided a special recognition as our awards, and it went to Costa Rica, who is an agency who is really strategically approaching SDG 5 in their work. So a lot of investment promotion agencies, they report or they're judged on how much investment enters the country, right? And so they report on, this year we attracted, I don't know how many millions or billions of dollars. What Costa Rica does in this agency, of course, the central bank will have the numbers, but the agency doesn't report on the quantity of investment or foreign direct investment that comes into the country. It reports on the quality. And so it reports on specific SDGs, and it reports specifically on SDG 5. So you can take a look at their impact report, but they look at specifically at the number of women that have been employed by foreign companies that have been facilitated by the investment promotion agency, or number of women trained in some of the training programs that they have with the multinationals that come in who are looking for employees, but they need to train them in terms of supplier links as well. So they're really working on that sort of elephant that we all have to deal with, which is the lack of data. They're really trying to invest in data, which is such an important topic, I think, also for all of us working in gender. And they also work a lot with trying to see what the impact of the COVID pandemic has been on layoffs by multinational enterprises in the country, or restructurizations on women specifically. So all of this to say, I could go on about this for a long time, but all of this to say that it's an ongoing work by UNCTAD, and we're working on this from many angles, and we're going to continue working on the investment promotion and gender specifically, because we've seen, of course, we believe in it and we're passionate about it, but we also see that there's a demand coming on the one hand from government, so our stakeholders who all have objectives at the national level on gender equality and are asking us how to operationalize them, right? And are asking us in the context of the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of increased demand by investment promotion agencies, by governments in general, asking us, how can we integrate gender into our investment strategies? How can we integrate sustainable development into our investment strategies? Gender as well as health, as well as other SDGs. So we see increasing demand on the one hand. And on the other hand, multinational enterprises, so these main actors in the foreign direct investment space, because they want to, or because there's more push factors driving them to do so, they're continuously increasingly reporting or have to report on their gender impact and on their activities. So there's this sort of demand on both sides for us to continue working on the space and finding those win-win solutions from the government. What are the right policies to be able to attract that investment, and what role does the government have to facilitate and channel that investment from multinationals towards SDG sectors and SDG 5 in particular. So yeah, I encourage you all to contact me, and I hope we can collaborate. I invite you all also to come to our World Investment Forum in October, where we'll also be discussing a lot of these issues. Thank you.
That's great, Stefania. Thank you so much. Next is our representative from the UNDP, Diana Gutierrez. We are speaking about the UNDP gender equality field. If you're not on mute and you're not speaking, may I ask you to please go on mute? Diana, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Sandrine, for this invitation. I'm delighted to be here and sharing a little bit more with the audience today about the work on how we can engage the business sector to advance gender equality, and more concretely about the gender equality seal for the private sector. Next slide, please. We know, and the previous panelists have shared, that the COVID pandemic has had a huge impact in progress that we had in women's advancement in the labor market, and we still have, close to half of women's brains out of the labor market. We're losing those talents, and we're risking to lose the progress that we already have. And we know that we have to work together with the business sector in a close manner, to develop their capacities and transform their practices, and identify those entry points where we can, mainstream the gender perspective in their operations. Next slide, please. So we know that the private sector plays a key role in the advancement of the 2030 agenda and the risks that is put in the COVID crisis. But the thing is that this is not only the right thing to do, this is something that probably the business sector already knows. But the key question here is, how can we do it in a practical manner? How can we approach and how can we transform our business practices in our core business, in the way we operate, in the way we deliver goods and services, right? So we have supported the development, next slide please, of what we call the Gender Equality Seal for the private sector, which is based on a model of national certification programs led either by Ministries of Women's Affairs or Ministry of Labor, or a partnership between them with private sector stakeholders that basically recognizes companies for advancing gender equality, for empowering women in the workplace and in their operations. It's voluntary, but once you commit to to advance on those commitments, you have to comply with the standards that have been established. We have a very solid framework based on gender equality regulations, human rights regulations, ILO conventions, the women's empowerment principles, and we have created something like very similar to an ISO quality management system, but here companies have to develop a very clear company strategy to advance and transform first regulations, then how those regulations translate into policies and actual operations and processes, and then in the end and in the long run to transform the organizational culture, transform behaviors, change, those usual social norms that, sometimes affect the way we operate in the companies. So they are committed to address 7 key operational areas, and they have to transform the way they recruit and select, the opportunities they are giving to women to advance in their career ladder. They have to identify what are the gaps in the remuneration area. They have to transform family policies and ensure that they, provide measures and mechanisms to, improve work-life balance, but with this notion of shared social responsibility, and transform the way the language, the marketing, the strategies are developed, and also how they are impacting their own supply chain across the operations. Companies in the end are audited, and if you go to the next slide, it shows the process in a very concrete way. As I said before, it's very similar to an ISO standard implementation, which follows the logic of the PDCA cycle: planning, doing, checking, and acting. And companies first commit, to advance gender equality, and this is a process that it's led by the senior managers, that, it embeds corporate culture and the corporate strategy. In the end, they have then to assess the gender gaps, then they have to create an action plan, an improvement plan to address the gaps they have identified in the key areas that we already mentioned. And then they are audited by accredited third-party firms that, check the level of compliance with the standards. And in this logic of continuous improvement, companies are committed to, to maintain the original situation that originated the gender seal, but also to keep improving and keep closing the gender gaps. If you go to the next slide, we have a proven track record right now. We have supported these programs in 16 countries, and more than 1,000 companies have been certified already in a variety, range of industries, including energy, mining, telecommunications, agri-industry, impacting workers, as I said before, in varied industries. And we have also, if you go to the next slide, we have also leveraged digital technologies to facilitate the process, and we invite you to visit the Gender Equality Seal platform, where companies have access to a dedicated tool to measure gender gaps. We have developed a gender equality index that measures the degree of equality of the companies between 0 and 100, and collecting qualitative and quantitative data, both from the organization and from the perception of the employees. We can, create this complete picture of what is the actual situation of the companies in regards to gender equality, and from that point, to start planning the process and advancing across the whole cycle. This is everything about the Gender Equality Seal, but before giving the floor to Sandrine once again, I would like to share with you, if you go to the next slide, that we have developed a methodology that we call the Ldg Investor Maps, and we have this is a tool that basically provides a very concrete investment opportunities areas that are aligned to the SDGs, where the investing community can come and look in specific countries where are those investing areas. And we have improved the methodology. This was launched earlier this year, and you can also visit the platform, ldginvestorplatform.undp.org. And we have ensured that through an improvement of the methodology back in March, how we can identify what are the gender impacts, either negative or positive, of these investing opportunities, and and provide better signals to the market. So this is coming. The next investor maps that will be developed will integrate in a very hard and concrete way the gender lens, and we will keep you posted on this. And now to finalize my intervention, I also would like to share a little bit more on the growth stage impact ventures for the SDGs, which is better known as the Gliese program that was put in place in 2019 to identify those enterprises from developing countries that were developing at-scale products and services that were contributing to the SDGs and at the same time they were achieving commercial success. We have proven that there is a pipeline of SDG-aligned investable ventures in developing countries, and this is very powerful for the investor community. And in this 2021 edition, UNDP has selected 12 finalists across different sectors, including quality healthcare, affordable and clean energy, and waste management. And for the first time also in the selection process, we ensured that we were going to prioritize those ventures that were advancing women's economic empowerment. And we have a very, very good finalists in this round. And we are delighted to collaborate with the GLIS, to bring forward more evidence of the importance of including and using the gender approach in impact venture acceleration. So I would like to give the floor to Sandrine that will share a little bit more about the Gliese Prize in this edition. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Diana. Maybe yes, just to go back to the beginning actually of our afternoon, we spoke about what SFG is doing and also what kind of event the organization is operating. And at the end of this year, end of November, beginning of December, you will have here in Geneva a very big event called Building Bridges. Inside of Building Bridges, you have the UNDP Impact Venture 2021, and we're very proud this year, and I hope for the following years also, contribute to the UNDP work and to give a prize to the one enterprise, the one project that is the most gender lens oriented. So the GLIS, SFG, will give a prize and will participate to the UNDP summit, giving and giving an award to the enterprise which has the most gender lens oriented action. Very proud to participate. Tim, do you want to add something maybe?
No, I think that we've covered really most of the items. Thank you, Sandrine.
Maybe the next step that we'll take. You want to do it?
Yeah.
I do.
You want to do it now instead of the Q&A? Sure, yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the next steps for the GLIS, for the Gender Lens Initiative for Switzerland, so we're getting close to the summer, so there will not be another event before the summer, and we will find you again as of the fall, as of September, for the follow-up events of the GLIS. We have a number of really good speakers who are going to talk about different approaches to gender lens investing in the fall. We also have, we're going to keep you updated through the SFG newsletter, in which we have a GLIS section now on a monthly basis. And of course, we're preparing a rather ambitious and large session of GLIS at Building Bridges during the week of the 29th of November. We hope to, when we launched GLIS, we were fortunate in March to have a lot of partners who supported the launch of the GLIS, a lot of institutional partners, both in Switzerland and abroad. And they asked us how they could engage further, what they could do to support further the GLIS. So we will be working in Q3 on different engagement options for the partners of GLIS, and we will try to communicate those options as soon as possible in the next few weeks or months, so that you can take a look at those and then make a decision on what you can communicate at Building Bridges. Because one of the ideas of Building Bridges is also to move from talk to action and from assessment to commitment, and we hope to facilitate that process in the GLIS framework as well. Sandrine, do you have any other comments on the GLIS for the next steps?
No, I think you said everything.
Okay, great. Now we still have a few minutes, and I'd love to ask a few questions from our speakers, if that's okay. I'll start with Anna, because Anna, you mentioned, of course, that you have this partnership with Bamboo. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the fund itself, and more specifically, where does it stand? Is it just a concept? Are you already fundraising for it? Do you have a time frame for the launch of the fund? And then a second question related to the data points you shared on the 7 global actions and the number of female-owned businesses that you've supported. I think you mentioned that you gave or facilitated some $6 million worth of grants to 270 entrepreneurs, and that's from a database, a broader database that you have of 3,000 women-owned businesses. So my second question is, what is ITC planning in the years ahead to scale up its capacity to support all of these women-led and women-owned businesses? And is there anything that other parties can do to partner with the ITC and support that work? So my first question on the fund, and the second one on scaling up your support to these businesses.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you for, I really learned and really enjoyed the discussion today. So, well, the fund has been launched at Davos. We are right now in fundraising mode. We have already some part of the first loss already guaranteed, but we're still discussing with some of our key donors. Just 2 weeks ago, we hosted a roundtable with all our key ITC funders. We are now focusing more on the first loss tranche, because the senior tranche, we have many leads already ongoing. So what about the fund, we are focusing on companies, we'll be investing in companies that create. So number one would be like create a safe, gender-inclusive workplace for women through the reduction of sexual harassment and gender-based violence, and that's why CARE's expertise comes really in handy right now, because they have this technical knowledge. Then the second type of investees are companies that increase economic prosperity for female consumers with products, services, etc. And then the third would be companies that are increasing gender equality for women employees. And finally, companies that are promoting the participation of women-led businesses and female producers in their supply chains, as well as potential investees that are female-led by businesses led by women. And this is where ITC comes with our expertise. So this fund will be supported by a technical assistance facility that is being delivered by both CARE and ITC. ITC will stick more to the competitiveness business side of things, while CARE will take care of the gender, the gender equality in terms of employment, etc. And we have altogether developed an impact framework. And of course, all of these, the due diligence process, the investment framework will be handled by Bamboo. So we thought that it's an interesting opportunity, especially for development partners. They can basically catalyze 4 times of commercial capital on top, and also put their ODA money to work through an impact investment strategy as a complementary approach to existing development programs that all of us, the UN and ITC, are used to work with. So this is where we are right now. So the fund will be debt and equity. I mentioned already the countries. We are giving priority to some specific sectors, such as healthcare, financial services, waste management, e-commerce, energy. I think I mentioned the intersection between gender and climate change before. So happy to discuss more on a different occasion. And on the second point, it's indeed we started with, because as you know, ITC, we are a technical trade-related agency, and at first was not 100% our mandate to focus on, of course, on access to finance, but we just could not just escape from that. And organically, we built this network of financiers, from commercial banks to DFIs, microfinance, impact investors, and all that. And we started doing this work, this matchmaking with our investment experts in a more manual basis. So really having experts reviewing each and every profiles of the women entrepreneurs and matching that up. As we speak, we are developing our new platform that will, because we already have a platform doing this matchmaking for businesses, for B2B meetings. And right now we are developing this automated platform to do that for us in a more agile way for for the investment side of it. So we have a plan. It's about using technologies, about using the networks of investors as well, and and hoping to automate this process to scale that up. But again, if there are investors interested in finding eligible, robust pipeline of women entrepreneurs, especially from Africa and Southeast Asia, do come talk to us. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna. To Heather, you guys have done such a great work in terms of researching the market, then extracting best practices that you've put in a guide, so it made it really easy for a lot of fund managers to implement those approaches. You've yourself, I think your IFC is EDGE certified, so you've also brought these practices to your own organization. Do you have plans to then start pushing for these practices in your portfolio? Because I think the IFC has a large portfolio, at least of financial institutions around the world. Is that part of the plan for the next few years?
So Tim, thanks so much for the question and highlighting some of the other areas of gender that we're trying to walk the talk. We also have, in terms of procurement, I know Anna's highlighted that a bit with some of the work she's doing. We've also have a commitment to double our procurement spend, the World Bank Group, on women-owned businesses by 2030. So trying to walk the talk here. But in terms of our portfolio, yes, I mean, this is our shareholders expect us to do this, and we have been in the financial institutions. I mean, we have a portfolio of over 2.8 billion, but we also do look at other areas across our portfolio. So I've highlighted what's happening in the financial sector, but when you look at our manufacturing clients, our clients in infrastructure, so we work very closely with all of them to address a number of gender issues. So gender-based violence is a key aspect, and it's more prominent. I mean, globally, 1 in 3 women are a victim of some type of violence. And so in some areas, it's awful, but in some areas of the world where we have clients that are committed to addressing that, we have been advising in them and working with them. And we're about to come out with findings from our work in Papua New Guinea, where the rate of domestic violence is quite high, and the findings of how we've been engaging with companies to help reduce that rate in terms of not reduce the rate in the country, but in terms of helping our clients support their employees that might be victims of domestic violence, because it does have an immediate effect on turnover, employee engagement, which then, as an investor, that translates into potential effects on your returns if you're investing in companies that face that. So that's one example. I think another example is we are EDGE certified, but EDGE gender certified, but we're also licensed to EDGE gender certify our clients. And so we have been doing that with quite a few clients in the East Asia Pacific region. We're working on that with a couple of our financial institution clients, so which is really exciting, because in addition to providing capital for whatever reasons the company may need, we also have the ability to help that company take intentional action to address gender gaps within the workforce. So those are a couple of examples. This is integrated into how we view our companies. I think one thing that is key to what we do is that anytime we work with a company, we need to demonstrate the company needs to demonstrate an intentional commitment to close a gender gap. So what we mean by that is, to us, Gender Lens investing isn't only investing in companies that may already be doing what's good. It's investing in companies that are committed to go beyond, committed to do more, to change a practice, to really push themselves. And so that's what we're doing with our portfolio. We have a lot to do, a lot more to do, lots of partnerships. And I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to flag one thing that's been interesting for us to engage with over the last couple of years is 2X. And there's a big announcement coming out this week on a new challenge for investors to really commit to Gender Lens investing. And so 2X has been a key knowledge sharing partner of ours for the next couple of years, and we're excited to join forces with them this week. And I'll put in the chat the link to the event for those that are interested.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Heather, for this complimentary overview. Very, very insightful. Diana and Stefania, I had more questions for you, but we are running out of time. So, very briefly, Stefania, you mentioned that you have engaged investment promotion agencies to great success, and you've actually started mapping what they're doing in terms of gender promotion. And you mentioned Costa Rica as an example, as a leading example. I was wondering if you thought that we could perhaps look at a couple of these investment promotion agencies and invite them to building bridges. The idea was to have some representatives of emerging markets come over and present the reality of sustainable investments in their country. And I think it would be very interesting to have some of the leaders on the gender lens front from these investment promotion agencies come over to Geneva. Do you think that would be a possibility?
I think that's a fantastic idea. We're always open to collaborating and giving the investor promotion agencies that are working in this space a platform to share what they're doing. So it's something that we do on a regular basis. But yes, the preliminary answer is yes, and hopefully by then we'll have even more of them doing more. So yes, happy to further discuss that.
Fantastic, thanks. And Diana, I had some questions about how long it takes and how much it costs to go through this process of changing your policies, your operations, your processes, and getting to a change of mindset according to the cycle that you described. Can you give us a very quick sense of how much time it takes on average and what the range of costs are?
Of course, it takes from 12 to 24 months, the whole process, since the company gets the commitment to the audit process. It also varies in terms of the types of practices that you have already implemented, in terms of the type of commitment and how strong is the gender perspective, have been mainstreamed across the operations. So it varies, but it can take between 12 to 24. And regarding the cost, it also varies across countries, but the actual process of certification, just the audit, could vary from $2,000 to $12,000, depending on the size of the company. But then you have to quantify your own plan, to address the gaps. So let's do an example. If you want to increase the number of women in leadership positions, perhaps you have to put in place an executive training program. So you have to cost that. So it also varies from company to company. So this, in general terms, it's what it takes.
Thank you, Diana. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our webinar. My thanks to Anna, Heather, Stefania, and Diana for really amazing insights, and more broadly, the amazing work that you're leading in each of your organizations to help just push the boundaries and make SDG number 5 a broader reality. It's super exciting, and we're very happy to have you on board for this webinar, and thanks again for sharing your expertise. Much appreciated. Thank you all for attending. My thanks to SFG as always for hosting, and look forward to speaking to you all very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Have a nice summer.